Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Honor with Heather podcast. It is a very cold and snowy Monday here in Calgary, Alberta. I am hanging out in the back room of Roselle Collective, and I thought, what better time than to try to do a podcast episode where today we're going to be talking all about public speaking, overcoming your fear on public speaking, as well as overcoming your fear of showing up on social media. I think this is going to be a great episode. Budding entrepreneurs, hairdressers, service providers, this episode is for you. If you've ever felt afraid of showing up and speaking out, this is your episode. All right, well, welcome back to another episode of the Honor with Heather podcast. Today, we are talking about going from fear to confidence, how to show up and speak out, be yourself, show up online, and all those great things. So I'm really excited for this episode. I hope that you'll find some value in it. To start, I'm going to share a personal story about struggling with public speaking or being on camera. So I have actually been pushing myself out of my comfort zone to do this for quite a few years. If you're somebody who has followed along with me on my hairdressing journey, probably around COVID was the time where I was like, okay, I need to start putting my face out there, showing my personality online, and hopefully connecting with potential clients through speaking to them directly. Obviously, this is super scary. I think for most of us, when we see like pictures or images of ourselves, we kind of cringe. But when we see video, it's even that much more because you're like, okay, well, I don't like the way this looks, or I don't like the way that looks. Oh, I said that stupidly, or I didn't get my point across clearly. And it takes a long time to really build that confidence. I think a lot of the time is that we are just afraid of how others perceive us. But at the same time, when you're trying to build a client-based service, like how others perceive you is so important. So I think this is especially important for business owners and creatives, service providers. And I think it's really important to try to overcome it for both personal and professional growth. So I just wanted to touch a little bit on understanding that fear. So I know for myself, I've personally had that fear. I can just think of so many times where I have been really hard on myself when I've made videos, and I just really think that people don't look at us as intensely as we look at ourselves. I think most people are thinking about themselves and how they are perceived, to the point that they don't really think about you and perceive you in a different way, if that makes sense. So I can be so scared about how my peers or how others might perceive my videos or public speaking, but at the end of the day, they're just nervous about whenever they have to go up next to public speak, or they're just as nervous about sharing their videos. I think there is something very powerful about showing up authentically as yourself on social space, especially as a service provider when our services are so saturated. What makes me a better hairdresser than any of the other hairdressers in the city? Nothing. The only difference is me showing myself, and my personality will connect with other people and their personalities. So I've been having this conversation with one of my stylists at the salon, because she's really trying to build her clientele right now. And I think that she needs to kind of show herself, her activities, and her interests, so that she will most likely end up with clients who have the same activities and interests, and therefore end up having a greater time behind the chair. I think we fear speaking up or showing up online because of a judgment, imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and there's a science behind that too. Our brains perceive public speaking as a threat, and our brains want to keep us safe because we don't want to be in any situation where we could be embarrassed. And when you kind of think about it like that, it kind of takes away a little bit of that big kind of scary thing about it, because at the end of the day, everybody is thinking the same thing. Right now, we live in an age of social media, and it makes it very hard to want to put yourself out there, especially for criticism, comparison, or anything like that. I know myself, it's very hard to continue to want to put out content, podcast, create education when it feels like that already exists so much in my industry. However, none of it exists that's by me. And that's the thing that I would encourage you listening to think about, is that nobody is a hairdresser like you. Nobody is a tattoo artist like you. No one is a service provider like you or a business owner like you. Nobody is doing anything the exact same way you are. You are yourself, and that is what is unique. So I think it kind of speaks to this conversation of a mindset shift, which really will help us open up and overcome our fear. And I'm hopeful that I'm able to help you with that on this podcast episode today. So if you've been following me on social media for a while, you know that one of the things that I speak about a lot is progress over perfection. I'm the first person to admit that I will not do everything right, but I will put myself out there. When I first made my podcast, I had no idea how to make a podcast. I just recorded it. The sound sounded bad. It was in my kitchen. I didn't realize the sound wasn't going to be good. My dog's barking at me. But the fact that I was able to put that episode out and then be like, okay, what are some variables that I can change for the next episode and the next episode? I think that is the better way to do it when you have something on your heart, when it's something that's really meant for you. I think that if it's on your heart and it's on your mind, it's meant for you. And I know I can take my own advice on this because writing is something that's really important to me, writing new podcast episodes and reading and getting lost in these stories. And I think because it's on my heart, it's something that I need to do more of. And I think the biggest thing that holds me back in that is thinking I need to have a finished novel written or 10 podcasts written. And it's not necessarily about having 10 perfect podcasts written. It's that I just need to start, and that sometimes those baby steps are good enough. So in terms of progress over perfection, I really think about it as you don't need to be perfect. You just need to start. One thing I would suggest is kind of reframing the narrative. So instead of thinking what if I mess up, or what if I screw up, or I look so stupid, or I don't like the way my hair looks, or whatever, think about what if I help someone today? What if I inspire someone today? What if I've made someone's day better just by showing up? And in terms of being a service provider, building a clientele, what if you make someone's life incredible by doing their hair or doing their tattoo or doing their Botox or whatever it is? We work as service providers to help the greater good, to help the general public, right? Your audience needs you and your clientele needs you. So people connect with authenticity rather, not perfection. And I think that this comes so true to when I think about my stylists and stuff. It's if you love reading, maybe you want clients who love reading. If you love being outdoors, maybe you want clients who love being outdoors. If you love singing or dancing, maybe you want clients who love those things too. And they're not going to know that unless you're showing up and you're sharing that and being your authentic self. I hope that this episode is resonating with some of you because I really do feel so passionate about this. Here are some practical strategies that you can use to show up with confidence. Okay, so some practical strategies that you can use to show up with confidence. 1, start small. Just record a few videos of yourself before posting. Try maybe doing a story instead of doing a reel, or perhaps try just getting out of your comfort zone. I think if you want to have abs, you might do 2 sit-ups today and then 3 sit-ups tomorrow and then 4 sit-ups the next day, but always that starting small and building on that momentum. 2, use a framework. Plan your talking points, intro, key messages, calls to action. I think for me, it's helped a lot, especially with the podcast, to write down everything that I want to say and then kind of wing it through that. So I'm never just winging it, but what I'm doing is I have my outline and I have room to move and manipulate through within that framework. 3, practice out loud. This gets kind of silly, but I do really think that practicing in front of the mirror or practicing in front of a video is a really great idea to build confidence and build speaking. So Mel Robbins, she always talks about how like in the morning every day to build confidence and to boost yourself and to like keep yourself going on the right path, to like give yourself a pound it or a high five in the mirror. And one of the things that I like to do, which is like kind of taking that and just making it a bit sillier, is just making a funny face at myself in the mirror. And that just helps me to take myself a little less seriously and just get comfortable. 4, engage with your audience. Treat it like a conversation, not a performance. So you and I are just having a conversation here one-on-one. It's not really that I'm trying to broadcast this to the whole entire world. 5, use some leverage tools. So try a teleprompter app. Make sure you have some good lighting, good editing, and a microphone if you're wanting to do that. We just got these little TikTok microphones for the girls in the salon, and I find that that's really helpful to like kind of give the girls some confidence because they've had this tool to use that's like kind of forcing them to speak. And if you are interested in getting those TikTok microphones, they're on Amazon and they're super cheap. So I definitely recommend that. 6 is one that I think I snuck this in here just for myself, but to breathe and slow down. Pause when needed, take some breaks. I know that I speak very fast, and that's something that I'm more critical of myself when I'm podcasting, is I'll listen back to my podcast and I'm like, oh, I should slow down. So just remember, slow is okay. No one's going to think you're like moving too slow or anything like that. If you found that this podcast resonated with you, I would love to hear some of your real life stories and some inspiration. I'd love to hear some success stories of people who overcame their fear of public speaking, people who overcame their fear of being on videos or putting themselves out there on their Instagram, and then learning like how you built more confidence in the camera, or on the camera rather. As always, I always encourage everyone to send me a DM at Honor with Heather on Instagram. And let's chat a little bit. I'd love to know some of your real life stories and inspiration. If you have not shared a short Instagram story today, I am going to challenge you to share a story today, even if you haven't posted yet. I think it's a cool idea to, with these podcast episodes, spark some conversation, but also spark a challenge. So if you listen to this podcast episode and you share a story of yourself speaking on camera, send me a tag, I will share it, and let's encourage more conversations. I love when people listen to this podcast, when it inspires them and when it does encourage them to take the leap. So let's do that. Confidence is built through action, not through waiting. So let's give it a go and let's start feeling confident today. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I love to continue to bring you new and exciting episodes. We've got some great guests coming up this year. I've already got a couple in the books. If you're interested in being in the podcast and you have something, a unique perspective or whatever, please feel free to reach out. As always, my DMs are always open at Honor with Heather, and I